Okay, so let's start with our resources spawn. So I'll go to the blueprint and under natural resources. Maybe I can move these stuffs to a new folder called maybe resources, right? Now I'll move this stuff to this folder because I'm going to create some spawners with respect to these natural resources. So the folder has been moved to this new folder, but there is a redirect that has been left off, I think over here. So you can fix the redirectors by going to the root directory, and let's fix up redirectors in the folder. Okay, now you can see there is no reference to the old natural resource folder. Yeah. Usually those stuff happen because we have already placed some object inside our maps, and if you have connected to the source control like me, it will save such trace files in your directory, right? So you don't need to necessarily have those stuff in your directories. You can simply clear those stuff by selecting these fix up redirectors. Okay, let's go to the resources folder, and I'll create a folder called spawners, right? And I'll create an actor. So basically this will be a utility actor, utility class. So I'll name this as resource spawner, right? And let's open that out, and I will close the rest of the tabs. Click yes. Okay, so we need some sort of a range to spawn our actors. So let's add a box collision first, like this, and we need to change this scale as well. So we can do that by creating a variable. I'll name this as spawnable area, right? And let's compile, and yeah, this should be a vector. Let's compile again, and I'll make this area like this, 300, 300 and 20. And let's go to the construction script, sequence, and let's set the box extent as this thing, right? Also, let's make this instant editable and assign a category called setup. Let's compile, let's go to viewport. Okay, now you can see we have this range. Awesome. So now you can place this spawner in your map like that, and I think we can maybe have a better higher size. Let's have maybe 500, 500. Maybe we can have more. See, 650, 650. Let's compile map. Okay, now this size seems fine, right? So we can use this thing to spawn our these natural resources. Okay, so let's create a function for that as well. But first we should have a resource list, like what are the resources that we are going to spawn and stuff like that. So let's create an array called resources list. So this will be in this natural resource base type, and it should be a class reference, and the data type should be an array. And let's make it instant editable and assign it to the setup. Okay, then yeah, maybe we can change the number of spawns or control the number of spawns within this spawn as well. So let's make it as an integer, single variable, instance editable, and under the setup category, and maybe initial spawn count, let's say 5, right? Okay, then let's create a function to handle that spawning. I'll name this as spawn resources, and we can have a for loop with respect to the number of spawns, like that. And we can take a random element out of this list and spawn that actor in the map. So we have to assign a value as well, so let's make it let's split that struct, and we can get the actor location. But if we directly assign this value, what will happen is that all the random array items will be spawned at only this specific position. So we don't need to do that. Instead of that, we need to get some random location out of this bound volume and spawn it over there. So let's get the box extent, and from that box extent we can get random point within this bounding box and assign it to the location. And as the rotation, actually we can follow up the get a rotation and assign it over here. And the scaling, I think this would be fine. Also, the collision preset, you can make it as try to adjust but always spawn. And once this item has been spawned, we can populate a spawn resource object instance array as well. Then later on we can easily refer that list and determine what are the current object instances within the spawn range. So let's create a variable called spawned resources. Again, this will be natural resource base but an object reference type, and it should be an array. So we don't going to manipulate this variable by ourselves manually, so I will not make it as instant editable. So I will keep it as it is. And let's promote this to a local variable. I'll call this as resource, and let's add that to this array like this. Okay, great. Right, and in order to have a proper naming convention with our spawn resources, we can assign a tag as well. So maybe if you go to the class default, there is Yeah, there should be a variable called tags. Yeah, so this tagging is there to uniquely identify the object that has been placed in your map. So I think this will be helpful for the spawning and despawning purposes. So therefore I will assign a tag to this specific act. So you can go to that local resource and get tags, and you can add a tag to this specific resource. So a tag should be having this tag should represent this specific resource has been spawned by this specific resource spawn. So I will create a function called get tag, and I'll make it as PO, and I'll return a value which should be a name, right? Because tags have name data type. Let's say return value. So first I will get a self reference and get the display name of this specific spawner, and I can append that with something like that, resource spawner and the display name, and plug it over here. So it will be like resource spawner BP resource spawner 1, something like that. It's a unique name for this specific spawner, and each and individual resources that has been spawned by this specific spawner will be tagged with that specific tag, right? Let's assign it as well. Okay, now this specific function should be called with the utility editor utility function, right? But just for testing I can plug it to the begin play, and let's try to simulate. Okay, this happens, yeah, because we haven't added any valid resource types to our list, so it tries to spawn values which has not been there. So we need to prevent such issues as well. So basically, instead of start the population, we have to first check, do we have at least a valid element, one valid element in this list, right? Because if not, there is no point of trying to spawn the resource, right? If we have that, yes, we can start spawning. Plus we need to determine whether the spawn number is greater than 0, right? Because if we have specified the number of spawns as 0, again we can't spawn anything. And let's make it as end and plug it over here. Compile and save, and if we try to simulate it again, yes, it won't spawn anything, but if you stop it, it won't generate any errors as well, because it always check this guard condition. Okay, right. Now let's add some resources. Yeah, I will only use one instance for now. Delete it. Let's try to simulate. See, now you can see the trees has been spawned, and each time when you are playing the game, it will be a different position. Again, this is not what we want, right? Because if the player comes to play the game and if he sees a different map all the time, it's not quite good as well. So instead of that, what we need to do is we have to statically populate this stuff in the map. so then their positions will remain as it is. So we can do that actually by using editor utility function. So let's go to the event graph, and instead of creating or spawning manually, let's first create the editor utility function, and I'll name this as 1_ populate resources. Right? So this is just a naming convention that I follow, because if you specify just as a name, that will be fine, but let's say you need sort of utility function that need to be executed in a sequential fashion, like let's say 1 by 1, then it's better to have this sort of index, right? A prefix number, so it will be easy to developers to figure out what is the editor utility function that need to be called first. Okay, so yeah, so let's make this as colon editor and compile, and now it has become editor utility function, and it should call this specific spawn resource function, right? So if I go to the spawner and select it and go to the details panel, here you can see now we have that specific editor utility function, right? So by simply clicking that, here we can populate the entire map, right? But if you try to click it multiple times, it will generate the infinite amount of trees, and it will overlap with the previous ones as well. So we need to prevent that as well. So it has to clear the previous instances before repopulating again. So I think maybe we can take a look at that utility function in the next video, otherwise this will be quite long. And yeah, we'll see that in the next tutorial.